Hey everybody, so today I'm sharing a quick tidbit with you today, a quick revelation of the Word of God. The Bible tells us the story of Israel as they are journeying through the wilderness, and God begins to make provision for them, so they begin to find food and sustenance as they were traveling. And the Bible then tells us that a substance, God would then provide a substance for them to eat every morning, which they named manna. Now, manna means what is it? It's a question. They did not know how to interpret this thing that God gave them daily for sustenance. There were a few rules that God gave them. Number one, don't store it. Don't store it. Get fresh manna every morning. Just trust me to provide and to supply you tomorrow, just the same way you did before. So every day, then they would get a fresh supply of manna, a fresh supply of manna, fresh supply every single day that is brought, and it would fall from heaven. But now here's a very strange thing about manna. Manna tasted like honey to kids. It tasted like honey to kids. So when the kids ate it, the toddlers and young people and teenagers and stuff, they would enjoy it. It tasted sweet. It was super sweet. It was like honey, and they enjoyed it. To adults, it tasted like bread. When they ate it, it would feel like they are eating bread. And then lastly, and most importantly, to the old people, it tasted like oil. Now, that revelation is quite interesting for me. Now, if you really understand that, then you would get this, that at every level of the word that you receive from God, you interpret it based on the level of maturity that you have. You get that revelation, and it can only be interpreted within the context of the revelation that you have. So, to the young who are impressionable, who like sweet things, my kids like sweet things. They already naturally have an inclination towards sweet things. It tasted like honey because they love honey. To the mature, it tasted like sustenance because bread is daily food. It is what we eat every single day. It's what we are used to. At this level of our lives, most of us in our 30s and 40s, we are dealing with issues of bread and sustenance, how to get through this, how to pay this bill, medical bills, and so forth. We are working out life, buying property, securing investments. That's what's on our mind. It's daily living, the sustenance of the day. And then to old people who have had sweet things and who have survived the bread of daily life, they like small things that are soft and things that are gentle. And so oil was what they felt like it tasted like to them. It is soft and palatable. It's gentle, and that's essentially how they felt. The funny thing about all these three things is that whenever God gives us a word, this word is received and interpreted based on where we are in life. When someone hears a certain word about giving, for example, if you are immature, it may not be conducive for you. It may be sweet, it may be strong, it may be aggressive. To a more mature person, it sounds like it tastes like bread. To an older person, it tastes like oil. This is the same thing, the same revelation that is being spoken. And sometimes we have to realize that the heart matters in the interpretation of revelation. The heart of a person or the maturity of a person matters in the interpretation of a revelation. There are certain words that were right, but maybe you were not ready. You are not yet mature to understand what that word was saying. And the reason why the reason why we are sharing our content on YouTube is one day you may be more inclined to understanding that message. One day that revelation will make sense because you are now mature enough for it. And maybe when you did taste it, you interpreted it differently, because if I tell you about being a parent and you're not a parent yet, you don't quite understand it until you have your own children. And even when you do have your own children, there are levels to understanding this, because a person who has raised teenagers is not the same as a person who has raised toddlers. There's a different revelation in each level of that. And I want to share something else as well. God specifically instructed that Israel must not store the manna, that rather they must consume it. They must take enough of what they need and consume it and not store it, because it attracts worms. It will kill you if you eat it because it will rot. And this is something quite phenomenal. I've learned that a Bible on its own is just a book. Some people do these protests and they burn Bibles and so forth. I don't get offended. It's just a book. It's just a paper that is printed. There's no value in a word that is stored. There is value in a word that is hidden. David says that thy word have I hidden in my heart that I may not sin against you. There's a difference between a trash can and a vault. When something has been hidden, it has been stored for later use, it is right there, it has been protected away from certain things, from certain elements. There's no worm that can get to the word of God in your heart. There's no fire that can touch the word of God in your heart. People can burn Bibles all they want, but the word of God that is being stored in the heart is safe, it is protected, it's hidden. And the difference is, some of us hear the word and we just put it right there in storage, and we're like, okay, we'll get back to it one day. We wrote notes about it. I don't know, I'll read them whenever I can. But the power of the word of God is being able to take that word and apply it in your heart and hide it in your heart. And that's what stops you from sinning against God. That's what stops you from going astray. That's what stops you from doing all of these other things. I always say to people around me, build your buffer. I say, build your buffer. You can wake me up in the middle of the night and ask me to preach a sermon, and I will preach my lungs out and I'll preach fire from heaven, because the word of God has been hidden in my heart. It's in the buffer. And so my father trained me. As part of my training into ministry, he would just say, I should be able to wake you up at 3 a.m. and I say, preach, and you preach fire from heaven. And for me, that has been a role that has been in my life for a long time. I am continuously conscious of the word of God. It's hidden. I've got a buffer and it's full. And so it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter where I am. It doesn't matter whether I have my notes or I have my Bible. I will sit down and I'll share the word of God, because that buffer has been built and has been established. So I encourage you, even though we do get a word daily. I mean, we get sermons here all the time. We get sermons at church and so forth. People are preaching to us all the time, but that word is meaningless in storage. It's meaningless if it's on your notepad, on your phone, and if it's not in your heart. Make it a commitment to say, I want to build my buffer, and so that I store the word of God here. That manna cannot sit for over a day because it will rot. And so instead, what it is, that daily provision of God for the word that he gives us daily must be stored in our heart. So consume it, consume it, consume it. God bless you.